Welcome to the Nightbird Radio podcast. I'm Timothy Saylor, and I'm going to be your host this evening as we sound out the subconscious, navigate the nocturnal, and explore the farthest reaches of our experience. Coming at you from the back of an 86 Dodge Ram van on the rolling foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains, in the Great Forest, deep in the heart of the Kali Yuga. This is radio for the hauntological turn. And welcome back, Nightbirds. I'm really excited to present this episode to you. I spoke with Reverend Janglebones, a wizard, musician, a writer, a teacher of magical techniques for the elevation of ancestors in the land, and someone I'm glad to call my friend. We didn't really have a plan on what we wanted to talk about. We just let it rip, and we went to some places that I've really been wanting to go on this show. We talked about the nature of the Archons, MKulture, the importance of authenticity, performance in the creative process, the works of Tolkien, piercing the veil, and so much more. So without further ado, let's get to the episode. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy the show. Reverend, welcome to the Nightbird Radio podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing really good. How about yourself?
I'm doing good, man. So before we hit the record button, we were having a really good conversation, as always happens, and talking about, what would you call that?
Kind of the idea that in general, we were talking about the idea that a lot of our lives is spent on the internet, and a lot of the way we share things with the people we choose to share things with, the ones we actually like, is on the internet, and how we typically only like to share finished products there, which means things are heavily edited, makeup and filters, and if you don't like something, you can just cut it out. You can edit most things, delete them if you change your mind. There's this strange detachment from the gritty stuff and the parts of life that you're struggling to piece together. I guess that's the core of it, but that kind of branches out into some different directions and whatnot.
Yeah, and authenticity, right? And one of the things we talked about was when I'm caring too much about the reception of this podcast, for instance, or whatever piece of art I'm making, if I'm thinking too much, I'm getting in my own way, which is something I talk about a lot on here because it's something I have done a lot. But it's actually that is a concept that carries through a lot of spiritual work, or whatever you want to call it. Like channeling, for instance, right? And I think that the creative process is that. It is channeling. I am kind of interfacing with whoever it is I'm interfacing with in that moment. When you're in the zone writing, it's like you're plucking stuff from the ether, or something's being whispered in your ear or something. Do you have that experience with that?
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes it's got urgency to it. Sometimes you've got that feeling like if I don't get this down, somebody else is going to.
and it often happens that way.
Yeah. And that can also be a comfort. It's okay if I don't get around to this idea. It's going to still find its way into the world, with or without me. It doesn't need me. But
yeah, I like that.
When you actually then you want to lasso that shit and ride it into the world and show everybody that you were the one brave enough to tame it, or to create it at least.
Right. And so if I spend too much time self-editing while I'm writing it, and I'm just going to keep going with this metaphor, but it really does apply to so much. If I spend so much time self-editing it while I'm doing it, then it never gets done. And to some extent, I'm dishonoring the spirit of the thing by trying to hide its warts.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's definitely something to be said for having the finished product that you want.
Sure.
But I think there's also this gradient effect of like how much of the field of what you are assuming other people want from you is pushing into that.
Yeah, and that's a total phantom. That's not, because that's so often, okay, so like you said, it's my idea of what I think someone else might want from me. It's like threefold not real.
It's real when you buy into it, but like
I make it real. Yeah.
It's like you're walking along on a blank piece of paper and then like drawing rocks in front of yourself.
Yeah, totally. And so we were talking about that in the context of podcasting, because you're a podcaster as well. Do you want to talk about your podcast? Do a little promo?
Yeah, sure. It's still very new. It's called Soapbox with Reverend Janglebones and Kurt Huggins. Kurt is a good friend of both of ours, actually, and he was just on this show recently, which was an excellent. And we pick it's just wizards talking about shit we like, and then so that's hopefully that unfolds and becomes something with shape over time. But right now we're basically just watching a movie, or that's not just movies, potentially choosing an artist or playing a video game or reading a book, and then getting together and just kind of talking about it. There will be spoilers all the time. Like, it's assumed that you either don't care or that you're gonna watch it or read it or whatever first. And then because we're both into magic, it's inevitable that whatever it is that we love, there's reasons we're pulled to those things that are like deeper in meaning and context. So the idea is to like kind of allow those things to just fall out of the conversation while we're talking about it, and then we get to expound on those things. But it takes a while to get your pace and everything, and and I'm still, like, I spent probably 12 years as a musician. That was like my main focus. Worked at restaurants and coffee shops and just pursued music. I think I've written like 60 some original songs, and that was a really wonderful time in my life where I learned a lot about this very dynamic. Like, it started off as like a desperation to write and play music. I needed to do it to stay sane, to express myself, to get some things out, to connect with others. And the performance of it, like, and now looking back, it's really interesting because I believe that ritual is inherently human, and that we actually need it in our lives the same way we need our vegetables, unless you're keto, and then like meat steak, smoothie. But I think looking back, that's what was happening there. Is I needed ceremony in my life, and I loved music, and that was a really nice way to have. So getting on stage, that became the sort of ceremonial thing. But then over time, like, I developed an audience and people that liked, like, I was kind of like local small town famous, and that ended up affecting how I was, like, the place where I was creating was coming from over time. Like, basically not having your shit worked out, you end up straying when there's these intensities. And that's like what that experience all was. It was a series of intense experiences. Being on stage is intense. Being recognized in town on your way to work every day is intense. The writing process, intense, just all of it. And of course, that's all laced with like drugs and alcohol. And and then, like, it's only been in the past year, after being away from music for 4 years completely, that I've been wanting to actually get back into it again. Because I get, without the drugs, like, I never learned to deal with performance anxiety without chemicals. So I never actually like conquered that hurdle. I just put Band-Aids on it until I looked like a mummy. Right. And then when the Band-Aids all fall off because you're fucking gross and you're sweating out heroin, like you realize like, oh, I actually don't have any actual coping skills for that. It's just patchwork bullshit.
It's just totally raw. It's like not having skin.
Yes. And then trying to like be more present again. Everything was such an immediate emotional experience that it's taken the last 4 years to get to the point where like I could convince myself to be on a podcast or, you know, really want to actually start playing music again either. It's really crazy how much it fucks you up when you fall into one of those holes. But I also still have that worry about like, what is it supposed to be? Are other people going to like it? Like there's this part of me that's kind of split where I'm always like putting part of my consciousness in the corner of the room to watch what I'm looking like while I'm talking. And that's when I say the shit that's not funny, that's not clever, that's boring and off base. And I, miss the mark. Like that's when you're not on point. When you're on point, you're like, you're not fucking thinking about it. You're in the moment.
You're in flow.
Yeah.
You're in the flow state. Yeah. I resonate with that a lot. Because I have similar experience. And I actually haven't thought about it this way until you said that, but I had the same experience with writing and, just general social interactions too, right? Like I used those drugs to not give a shit, to get out of my own way, right? And so I thought for the longest time that it was those things that were helping me connect to the inspiration or to connect to the creativity, or that they were like somehow giving me that. Really, it was like that connection has been there all along. It just made me not give a shit. But then it also kind of made me not give a shit about like anything. It's like trying to remodel your house with a hand grenade. Like if you need to blow out some walls, it might be all right. But like, you know what I mean? Like you're going to have to clean up some other shit too.
It's good for the demo work at least.
Right. Yeah, totally.
We've got some confused fucking contractors though.
So that's cool. I had a thought too when you were talking about your the premise of your podcast, because I wanted to talk about Morrowind a little bit.
Like as a subject for the podcast?
Yeah,
episode?
That would be a cool one, wouldn't it?
Want to come on the show and talk about Morrowind?
Yes.
Hell yeah.
Dude, that stuff is like some of my favorite lore. And I try to explain it to people sometimes, because it's what got me into to Gnosticism and really to magic in general, was like that Elder Scrolls lore, because the dude that wrote a lot of it was putting his personal take on that shit into the myths of the game.
Yeah, that's that would be really cool.
I mean, we could do something different, but that was just an idea.
No. I mean, I want like once we start having guests, which I imagine will be pretty soon, because I'm getting really excited about the idea. Like I'm feeling like Kurt and I are starting to get our groove. I think a few more episodes and it'll be like, we're pretty solid. Let's bring somebody else in and make it more interesting. But I want them to be able to kind of pick whatever they want, with the knowledge that we kind of have to do it. But also we don't have a whole hell of a lot of time. Like I have a lot of time right now, but Kurt doesn't necessarily.
Yeah, so he can't play like the whole game of Morrowind. You mean like?
Right. I mean, like he could probably play it for a while and then watch like a video that summarized all the lore, because that's really what we'd be probably talking about. But yeah, that'd be cool.
Just a thought. I just have it on the brain lately. I haven't played a lot of video games lately because I feel like the UI gets burned into my dreams and stuff.
Oh man, I do. Well, it's really weird. If I play too much video, like if I play too much, I dream in like a hyper focused state where I wake up and I'm just like, wide awake, and like my head's got all the energy in it.
Yeah.
Something I did notice was something Gordon had in the Protection and Malefica course with the magnets. That really helps like degauss your body after you've dealt with a lot of electronics, I found.
Oh yeah, I need to get back on that. That was really good.
Yeah, really good.
Crazy stuff happened.
This is just for anybody listening, you just take a magnet and put it on like your third eye and slowly move it down the center, up and over your head and down your back. Just slowly, and do that like 3 or 4 times. And it makes you, it relieves a lot of this weird static tension that's kind of in the periphery that I think a lot of people just live with and don't notice it's there. But if you're a practitioner, it's like, fuck, I feel like shit today. I don't know how to get rid of this.
Yeah, I wonder if that would be a good, because like I'm constantly in the state of becoming more and more addicted to my phone, and then having to like walk that back, and then becoming more and more addicted to it again, like in waves almost. And I kind of wonder if that's just like obviously designed to do that, but it's a constant process. I've been noticing it lately.
Yeah, I actually have been doing it more lately too. I think because of the podcast. I think because I'm more like, I wasn't very active for a while when we were like the last 8 months. We were living in Germany for a while, and now we're back in Denmark for immigration reasons. But now I'm legally here, so everything's kosher. But yeah, now it's like I'm just going in a phase where I'm more active again, and like we ran the course. I do a course on connecting with spirits of place and ancestors, ancestral elevations, and healing some wounds there. And
where can people sign up for that?
You can just shoot me an email at reverendjanglebones@gmail.com, and I'll send you all the info.
Cool.
We don't have like a site set up yet or anything, but that I guess is probably coming in the future. But Tim here was a participant in the course. So was Kurt. And but so that's that. We ran that recently. I ran it and with Beverly, and it was like dead in the chat. Like no one talked most of the time. But I realized like I wasn't putting myself into it as much either, because I was just in this depressed state, living in an apartment and surrounded by ghosts, because, well, Flensburg, Germany got air raided in World War II. And it was just like an ocean of dead. And no matter how much I prayed and elevated or tried to move on, like it would be fine for like 24 to 48 hours, and then it would just flood back in. And it was just really, I think the whole time we were there was this experience of like, you're going to be thankful that you're back in Denmark. You're going to be so grateful for the place that you're going back to. And it worked. But because of that, I wasn't able to really put as much outgoing energy in like getting people to try and talk about their experiences and stuff. And I feel really bad about it, but I also got the feeling that most people didn't really even want to, that they were just kind of like, oh, I'm good. I just want the homework. So yeah, it's a weird experience to I don't like to say teach a course, because it's like, I don't know, who the fuck am I? But like, it's but to facilitate something like that where people are going through big stuff, like you want to do the best you can and you want to be there for them. But like, if you're going through your own shit, it's weird. And then if you don't hear a bunch of feedback either way, I guess it's safe to assume everyone's pretty happy. But it's cool because now, I guess with the spring energy and being back home, and holy shit, I can think and feel things again. Like I could barely do any magic or spirit work at all while we were there. It was really difficult because it was just so much interference and static. And I like worked on my boundaries constantly, and it seemed like nothing really held up the walls. But now that
the process of always having to put up walls is like, sometimes it's necessary, but when you have to do it for a long time, it's just like, God, I don't want to be doing this. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I want to invite guests in, but if I can't, you know what I mean? Like, it's necessary, but it doesn't feel great. Sometimes
Maybe
for a long time.
Maybe for me, the word maybe net would be better.
Ooh, yeah.
Because it's pretty specific. Like I try to fill up the home with my spirit team,
Right.
so that there's no room for anybody else.
I like
but
it.
if I start to get a little depressed, then that slips. If I don't do my practice for 2 or 3 days, then like I can find myself in a hole pretty quick where I like might not even really believe that going and saying prayers is going to help.
Yeah,
that's
I can
how.
get there too.
Yeah, it was bad like that when I was there, but it's weird. There's just this whole reemergence and spring happening at the same time where I'm like more active online, started the podcast, starting the course back up again, and I'm trying to bring this like different energy to it. And yeah, it's really fun. It's really cool to see these big waves and patterns that happen. And in the midst of that, I end up finding myself realizing that the phone addiction is very real. Like, and it doesn't even bring you actual pleasure. It's just this like staticky feeling that interrupts other things you're doing and says, maybe there's a thing there that's for you.
Yeah. And then it's like hooks. It feels like hooks to me.
Ooh.
You know?
Gross.
Right. Not cool.
No.
Like Hellraiser style hooks that are coming out of this fucking thing. You know what I mean? Like I want to explore the reaches of experience, but like I don't want to be that kind of Cenobite. I'm not gonna be a fucking phone Cenobite.
Well, that's like on the most recent episode, we compared social media to the resonator and From Beyond. It's it's making you see a bunch of phantoms, and suddenly all this stuff that was invisible before suddenly can hurt you.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I don't know that I got I listened to the first half. I don't know that I got to that part yet. Well, obviously I didn't because I don't remember. But
it's long.
Yeah. That's cool too, because like I love to have stuff to listen to. Like I run out of stuff to listen to. And so there's always room for more podcasts in my life. And I like the long form stuff too.
Are you up on Perfume Nationalist?
No.
Perfume Nationalist and Agitator have been my favorites recently because they're both very un-PC and very like in the spirit of just like being who you are and trying to like realize that your own context matters and that just because that upsets someone else doesn't mean that you don't have a right to exist. Like that seems to be like the core premise of both of them to me. At least Perfume Nationalist is amazing because it's such a cool concept. It's about perfume. Each episode he picks a different perfume.
Really?
And then he pairs it with movies that match the mood and the vibe of the scent.
Oh wow.
And it is just fantastic. Like he kind of looks at the films that he picks too. He doesn't describe the plot or anything. He just talks about them and their cultural impact and like the way that the aesthetic feels. And it's just a really neat show. I didn't think that I'd find myself like, I didn't think I was interested in Amy Grant's career, but when I hear Jack talk about it, it's fascinating. And that to me is just like, that's the kind of culture we don't have anymore because everything's like done on polls first before it's created, just to make sure everyone likes it. So people aren't just throwing shit at the wall and figuring out like what it is they want to do like this enough anymore.
Yeah, it's like it's decided by an algorithm, right?
Pretty much.
And we are algorithm free here.
Well,
I don't know shit.
It's test audiences before that. You know, they would have like a group of in the theater and they would show them the movie one way and they would show them the movie end the other way and they would have the group decide and then they would ruin it accordingly.
Right.
Like of course, you know, obviously what a movie should be is something that makes everyone happy, right?
Yeah, I think the best stuff is the stuff that like either disgusts me or puts me off in some way. Like, because I really did like the conversation that you guys had about comedies on your last episode.
Yeah.
And that really did. I was like, wow, that's a good point. It's kind of like someone trying to give you a hand job that you don't want them to. You know, like
You want a handy? No, I really. I just would like to. I was too drunk to drive. You said that it was cool, but are you sure you don't want a handy?
Right, but like I think the best stuff like somehow attracts me in spite of itself, or in spite of me, maybe is a better way to put it. I don't know, but in spite of my preconceptions, you know, like I remember like the first time, and this was like back in high school or whatever, and I was like a good little Southern Christian boy, and I heard and watched like videos of David Bowie performing, and I was like, oh, that makes me feel weird, you know, but it's like my favorite shit. And like I asked this question a lot on the podcast, like, what were you afraid of as a kid? Because I feel like that answer to that question, it says a lot, because the things that I was afraid of as a kid are the stuff I'm obsessed with. And I was obsessed with it as a kid too, but I was like drawn by that fear. That fear was what pierced my armor. Like, you know, as magically operant people, like I think there's always a transgression there, right? Like how, like not even just how did I get into that, but how do I continue to put myself in that framework? Is like I wandered into something somewhere I wasn't supposed to be, and maybe saw something I wasn't supposed to see, and it's over after that. You know what I mean? I can't stop thinking about it after that.
Yeah, but some people just kind of brush it off. Some people go to great lengths to ignore that shit. So
yeah,
it's really interesting why some of us just, it takes one time and you're on board, like Mulder.
right, yeah. Yeah, because I'm definitely like, you know, I respect skeptics a lot, but I have pretty much come to terms with the fact that I'm not one. Like maybe I have skepticism is a quality sometimes that I'm willing to like play with, but I'm pretty much like a true believer to where like I actually go like full bore, and then I have to like walk back a little bit and be like, okay.
Word. I totally feel that.
Yeah.
That's always kind of been my way is to learn, to get into anything new or to understand anything. I have to go hard.
Yeah.
And then learn why, like I went too far.
Yes. I like that.
Because to me, if someone says like there's a wall there, I literally can't see it. I have to go smack my head into it first.
Yeah. Or like when people are like, don't do that, I'm like, why'd you say that? It makes me want to do it. Especially in magic. People are like, oh yeah, don't fuck with that ritual, or don't do this. I'm like, well, don't do something on an eclipse. It's like, all right, well, I'm gonna do it, and then we're gonna find out. Like, you know?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, no, eclipses are great for magic as long as it's a curse.
Right. I think I've accidentally cursed myself that way, and that's like okay, you know, because if goes back to the same conversation we were having before. If I'm constantly worried about what's going to happen, and I'm tiptoeing and getting in my own way in that way, then nothing's ever going to happen.
Right.
And I can stay in my safe box.
So here's a little, when I was a kid, my mom worked as a house cleaner, and I grew up in Gulf Coast, Florida. So this was like multi-million-dollar home with an elevator in it and a Miss Pac-Man machine that I would play while my mom cleaned the house.
Hell yeah.
And when I don't remember this at all, but when I was too young to remember, probably around 3 or something, like she made sure to explain to me that this big red button on the wall was something to never press. And course I pressed the fucking button. I don't know if it took a while or if it was like 10 seconds after she walked out of the room, right? Probably the latter. But then like the cops and the fire department came, and it was like a huge embarrassing mess for my mom. And I'm like thinking back, just like, I wonder if she learned her lesson from that. Like if she actually, I'm trying to think if she ever did that again after, and I don't think so. I think
yeah, that's a good lesson for everybody, right? And so that's a perfect example. Like there's certain things I'm never going to learn unless I try, and like to try is often to fail, and I'm putting air quotes on it because like failure, and by whose standards, right? Like it's not a participation trophy thing. It's just the fact that like I learn something every time I fail at something.
Man, I just saw that's funny. I just saw it earlier today, like a post Daniel 4 made on Instagram, that it was just him talking about how in other cultures and other traditions, messes are built into the system and they're expected to happen. And you are taken care of, and it's never treated like it's a chore to help you clean up your mess. It's inevitable that you're going to fuck it up if you're doing spirit work at some point, and you're going to need someone to help you out. And like, we have such a culture of dog eat dog. I will fuck over my best friend to get the promotion to make like a 50-cent raise, or whatever. Yeah. Even if 50,000 a year better, like that's still fucked up to, but that's like, that's American ethics. That's literally like what we believe the right thing to do actually is. We will say the other thing, but we know deep down the right thing to do is to look out for myself, because your neighbor probably thinks the same thing. And there's just this weird, but I don't know where I was going with that.
No, you're good. I do want to ask you this question though. What were you afraid of when you were a kid?
What wasn't I afraid of when I was a kid?
That's the best answer.
I wasn't afraid of saying the wrong shit, and I wasn't afraid of pissing people off or getting people offended. And I was pretty good at talking my way out of trouble, like very good at talking my way out of trouble. But I had experiences like recurring dreams that, at this point in my life, it's like, was it a dream or was it, like sort of an in-between thing, or was it an actual abduction? But, this thing would open the door to I had sliding glass doors in my back room, and it would open the door and come grab my ankle and just pull me off the bed. Like it wasn't menacing. It wasn't like, I'm going to kill you. It was just this black figure with orange angular eyes, like a lot like an alien, but like a little bit more like demonic kind of. Yeah. It actually really resonates with what Whitley Strieber had happened to him. It's very similar to that image, although I have no recollection of its presence or anything, because all I felt at the time was terror. And my experience of this was that it was a dream, but my parents did think that I sleptwalked when I was a kid. I don't know how to say that in past tense. Sleptwalked.
Sleepwalked? I don't, yeah.
Yes. Shanksmere. And sometimes I would be on the couch when they would wake up in the morning, and like I would have no memory of going there or anything. So I don't know, whatever was going on, it was something. But I also, partly because of that, but partly because as I was falling asleep at night, when I'd get into that state where I was in between, I would get images of, I don't know how to explain this. Have you ever seen Berserk?
Yes.
Do you know the eclipse scene?
I haven't seen a lot of Berserk, so probably not.
Essentially, it would be like what you would imagine hell to look like projected into my mind when I was going to sleep at night as a little kid. And it was like flesh tearing and bodies and screaming and flames and things, just like horrific shit.
Yeah.
And the church that I was raised in never believed in hell. Like I was raised in a in a weird almost like a Jehovah's Witness, where we celebrate the Old Testament holidays, and we didn't do Christmas or Easter or anything because they have a lot of paganism in them, and they actually were pretty proud of themselves for doing that research and all that. And but so I never got taught that it was even a place that humans ever go. So
Interesting.
for me to have that, it wasn't implanted in me from church or anything. It was not some kind of indoctrinated thing. It was happening in between cognitive states, and it would jar me awake. And then I would have to sleep on my back and make sure that like all my limbs were on the bed and not hanging over the side, because I don't know why. Apparently I was just safe if they couldn't see them.
Yeah, I did that too, actually. I think that was because, yeah, I felt like if it was hanging over the side, then it's fair game or something.
Yeah,
I think there's a combination of did you ever see the movie Little Monsters? With
I don't think so.
It's really weird. It's got Howie Mandel as like the monster. But like it's really one of those, it's an 80s movie, so like it's a kids movie, but it's like really kind of fucked up. Like it's scary. And there's like a whole monster world under the bed. And so I think it was a combination of that and but like, yeah, they're the kids that go down there, like they're getting their heads pulled off and shit, man. Like it's the no holds barred. And then which Freddy Krueger movie was it? Where the cover of the VHS was like his hand coming over the bed. Dude, I didn't even see the movie as a kid, but just the cover of it in the video store was enough to give me nightmares. Bless you.
Thanks. Yeah, I didn't watch horror movies when I was a kid either. I liked things that were like like weird and creepy, cool kind of stuff. Like I loved like Labyrinth and Beetlejuice and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But anything that was intentionally supposed to be scaring me, I just had a hard no. Now I know how to fucking like tell a spirit to go away. So like it's actually really weird. This is the first time in my life I've been getting into horror, like more and more of that kind of genre lately. And it's cool because it's all fresh to me.
Yeah, that is cool.
For the most part. But yeah, because for me, that was an invitation. I was like, these things are already in my fucking head and I don't know why and I don't know how to get them out. And, I never, that was another thing I was afraid of when I was a kid. I was afraid of telling my parents that it was happening to me because I was afraid that they would think, because in my mind, my logic was, if God is good and all good, right? And basically they thought that any spirit contact at all was a demon trying to trick you. And in this case, they were just straight up like, we're evil, making a display of being evil, really.
Yeah.
Which is odd. I think you don't often see that. You see a lot of spirits trying to trick you into shit, but like not a lot of spirits like, look how fucking badass and fiery and
right.
It was just
or like intentionally causing destruction. Like that's actually like more of a human thing to do.
Right. And I don't know what that's about, but I'm sure I'll find out one day, even if I'm dead when I do.
Right.
But yeah, I was afraid to tell them because of my logic. God is all good, and if these things are happening to me, I was afraid if I told them that they would think there was something wrong with me.
Yeah, and like it somehow makes you bad, or like you deserved it, maybe. Or I hear that. And
then from there, like, well, they're not going to choose me over God. That was the next thought.
That just reminded me for some reason, and this is something I haven't thought of for a while. I used to have like compulsive, blasphemous thoughts.
That's
And
hot.
isn't that hot? And it was like, because, in church I remember like I read the Bible and I listened in Sunday school because I was into that shit. It was cool, like, yeah, I like these stories, but there was always that thing of like blasphemy, or like, even I think there's some verse in the New Testament about like that Paul writes about like the unforgivable sin or whatever. It's blasphemy. And just so it comes back to that idea, like the red button, right? Just the fact that there is this thing that you can't do, my mind would just immediately like, and so it would freak me out because in my head would be thoughts of like, fuck God, God's not real, fuck that shit. You know what I mean? And I would get scared of that. Just having those thoughts. But really, I don't know. Yeah, I'm just thinking about that for the first time in a long time. It's interesting.
That's really relatable to me. I've always been very impatient. I'm severely ADHD, and I only really
Same here.
Yeah, and I only really figured it out in recent years. So it's been a trip to be like, oh, all those things that I've literally hated myself for not being able to like keep up with other people for. That's a disability. That's like actually a thing where you're cognitively different and you don't function normally. And it was just so incredible to me to find out that was not just me. Like that these are like reading the symptoms and reading like other people's struggles. It's just like, holy fuck. Yeah. Basically, my conclusion is that ADHD people are meant to exist in a world where immediate needs matter and not like fabricated bullshit, like societal things. Like if basically ADHD people living in the woods would be fine.
Right.
Because they get hungry and they think like, oh, I got to go get food now.
And my edge detection is on point. You know what I mean? Like I can see that shit over there out of the corner of my eye, just moving against, like I always kind of saw it as a superpower, and I was prescribed like Ritalin and Adderall in like first grade, right? So given government speed, basically.
Yeah.
And not the fun kind, because you don't have any of the like euphoria. It's just that hyper focused, but then the flip side of it is like total depression and like mania, like fucking losing your mind, basically. Like, but so it's funny thinking about those like don't even want to call them intrusive thoughts, because they're just like like I was just testing the world that I was being told I was just testing the acceptable reality. So my thought would be, okay, well, like, let's find out, So like, oh yeah, you can't say this about God. Well, let's check it out and see what happens. Am I going to get struck down? And like, will I immediately be transported to hell? Or like, will no one give a shit? And so then fast forward to being given those medicines, and it doesn't really like take those away, because I wouldn't be able to sleep, or, medicine. I'm going to do air quotes on that because like, fuck that, right? It's like weaponized. It's like MKulture shit, basically. And so I wouldn't be able to sleep. And so all of a sudden, this mind that's going a mile a minute kind of became like a weight to train with, to where like, okay, like if I'm going to be able to like go to sleep or not lose my mind or whatever, or be able to lay here in the dark with myself, like I'm going to have to figure something out. Right. And so I would start to do basically like what you do to enter into a journey, or do any kind of energy work or any kind of visualization work, or really any kind of trance where you go into the relaxation. And so I would relax, like consciously relax from like the tips of my fingers down my hand to my arm. And I didn't know what that was, but that was just an instinct for me. Like if I'm going to be able to live in this world like this, then I'm going to have to figure something out. And so, like, lo and behold, later on, I figured out that's a thing.
Yeah, that's I actually went through exactly the same thing. I was probably like 13 when that happened though. And it was my cousin and I laying on a couch together watching cartoons in Ohio. And we both just started like, whoa, I've been laying here so long that I can't feel my body anymore. And I was like, me too. And then we started playing with that. And that was like, I figured it out with my cousin just hanging out. And then that became like my first meditation practice. And, you know, it sucks that I figured it out that late, but it was, I mean, I could have used it before. But what I was saying about those, like the intrusive thoughts and stuff, being ADHD and combined with that, I think maybe, and you saying like that, saying fuck God is like in your head is like this way of feeling out the room, like trying to find the walls in the invisible room or where the furniture is so you don't stub your fucking shin. Or like if you eat furniture, if anyone's like lying about the invisible furniture. And for me, it's been this thing with violence in different ways. Like I would have really violent thoughts just pop through my head. I do think that this was probably a life of penance for me because I think it was probably I probably murdered a lot of people. Not murdered, but maybe like in some kind of self-justified crusade or something. I think I was probably responsible. And that might be what is echoing through because there's no reason for a child to have that much death and misery like coming through unless they earned it somehow in another place and time. But that would come through as violence for me in these like flashes. And I would have to like reconcile that and kind of feel the walls out of like my own morality. And like, what do I actually feel from this? And I swear when I was younger, I was a sociopath and now I'm not. I don't know how that's possible, but I had that disconnect where like I would run through shit in my head and be like, this doesn't actually bother me. And I became sort of obsessed with that idea for a while and like imagined things just to see like, why don't I feel this? And then I come to find out that was all may have actually had something to do with the trauma from the abduction experiences, because those came up in a healing session with a shaman where I had an imprint on me from those experiences that was still fucking me up. And that happened 2 years ago or less, less than a year ago, I think. So and that's interesting. You mentioned MKulture a minute ago because I have this wonder about that. Like, is my abduction experience that instead of an actual abduction? Is because there's this. I know they were experimenting with splitting consciousness and intentionally causing multiple personality.
Right.
And it's like what happened. What my condition of like this weird split that I've had is, it's not quite that. It's not enough to be that, but it's like there's something about it. Yeah, I kind of forgot where I was going.
Well, it makes me. Well, you mentioning that makes me want to talk about here's my pet theory about MKulture. You know how whoever it was at the time, like they got to a point and then they like burnt all the records and like got rid of them, and they're like, oh, we didn't find anything. It
didn't work, but let's make 20 more programs based on this one.
Yeah, it didn't work. We didn't find anything. Just there's like literally there's nothing to see here. They just took it wide. They were like, okay, this is ready for the public. So now we're going to take it wide. So we have to burn what we did because we're going to do it to everybody. And so like what's happening with the pharmaceutical companies and all that shit is just, man, I want to start a whole nother podcast about this. MKulture. You know?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. MKulture was the beta.
Yeah, it was the beta test. Right.
They finished
and then they took it to scale.
Yeah. No, I think that makes sense.
It makes my childhood make so much more sense when I think about it that way, because I'm like, how could you? Okay, because I also hated school. I hated it so much, and I couldn't function normally in it. And I thought that made me less than, or like you were talking about, like when you found out about ADHD, that it's like, oh, this is something that an experience that other people have. Well, right. But then also they took me into like the talented and gifted program. So they took us aside, and it's like, what was going on with that? But then also I was on so many drugs all the time that I really don't have like a very good memory of any of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah. And who wrote the curriculums and you don't know. I think you're really onto something there with the pharmaceutical stuff, because I think what they did was they took a bunch of kids and they pumped and soldiers and pumped them full of shit. And then they looked at the results, a bunch of different things, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
And then from the results, they went like, well, this handful of these things we tried is actually potentially useful for us. So now we go live with these. And we work them into the pharmaceutical industry. We develop reasons to have them in the first place, like, start creating diagnoses and creating disease. And then you have reasons to put these things in place. And I do think that there are these shifts in, I think autism and attention deficit disorder are like neurodivergence in general. There's shit happening, and I don't know how much of it's natural and how much of this is deep evil plot. Because I mean, like, if you go digging, if you actually are brave enough to go do your fucking research on Black projects, nothing seems too far-fetched.
And nothing seems accidental. Like, okay,
right.
So they did 30 to 40 years of covert research on trauma-based mind control. And then you're wanting to tell me that they just like shut that down, but now everyone is traumatized all the time, and that's a coincidence? Like, come on, dude.
No, and that's just the thing. I know I'm being mind controlled when I lose like my sense of self, and I have to say prayers every day to keep that sense of reality. Because if I don't for like a couple of weeks, I'll question whether or not spirits are even real. And
me too.
Natural. Someone living 200 fucking years ago wouldn't have that problem, or maybe two, depending on where they're. 1,000 years ago, 6,500 years ago, definitely not.
Right.
But there's this current that's here, even outside of the sensory data and input. There's the spirit of whatever this thing is that wants us to detach from reality and the world that is composed of spirit,
which is just dissociation.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, but what does that mean? Like, just dissociation mean?
Right. Right. But my withdrawing from the world of spirit and saying like, oh, that's not real, that is a form of dissociation, because I'm dissociating from what's actually real and observable about life. Right.
But calling it dissociation, it's like there's this clinical sounding word that we now have been duped into applying to what is actually ruining your fucking life.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like, so there's this minimization going on in the language that, and we don't have adequate language for these things.
Yeah, already don't.
So
it's interesting. Go ahead.
Because I think the whole like don't appropriate psyop is to keep us from gathering language from other cultures so that we can appropriately discuss this shit. Like,
it's all theater of separation. But like, you go like, yes, the don't appropriate thing for sure, because I think that like cultures have been interacting for like, they used to interact more than we interact now, like like the continent of Turtle Island was like a place where people came from all over and shared space. And, you know, and so it's interesting to me that's put under the rug, because when anything is brushed under the rug, I immediately am like, maybe there's something to that. It goes back to the red button. Like, why are you brushing this under the rug that like Vikings came here and that the Egyptians came here and that the Moors came here and that there were black people and brown people and white people here, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And going, yeah, that's, I mean, and what you were just saying, even if you just go with the Native Americans, if you look at their creation myths throughout the tribes, what you get is a continent full of people that were from the entire far reaches of the galaxy.
Oh yeah, that's great.
They're not just from here or there. They all have different our lineages and creation myths, so they're all different people.
I got goosebumps when you said that. Okay, I also want to go back to something you said in the MKulture conversation. When you were talking about how much of it is just natural, or I can't remember exactly how you said it, but how much of it is just a natural response and how much of it is whatever. How much of the neurodivergence, okay, so like, I think it's observable that when power, whatever you want to call it, like when the powers that be, like their creations often get away from them, right? Like I think the internet is a good example of that, like a military project that kind of got away from them. And they probably, like, if you ask the people that brought about the internet, they might be like, yeah, that wasn't the greatest idea, like in the end, right? Because I think it has brought more free thinking than it has control.
Do you think so?
I don't know, man. Actually, that's a good point. I used to think that, and now I'm like, I just said it and was like, wait, I don't know.
I don't know either way either. I would say that I'd say it's completely possible that the percentage is this, that the ratio is still the same, but the people being mind controlled have been pushed into a further extreme and a further compartmentalization, and the people that are not being as controlled are even further educated and even further removed from the reality the other people are living in.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like the separation has gotten bigger, and you're saying if it's all about separation, like then it looks like bad guys are winning.
Yeah, and actually it gives us the illusion of connection without any of the messy nitty gritty of it, right?
Yeah, that's the.
But it allows this. But it allows this.
Yeah.
So it allows this conversation too, right? So, I mean, I've met a lot of really like people I would never have met. So, like I said, I think you're probably more right than not.
Of the dissonance of Melkor in the Silmarillion is allowed. It is permitted to resonate throughout all of existence until the end, because the dissonance will create more beauty later than could have ever been possible otherwise. And so I think this compost heap of an apocalypse that we're standing in or about to be standing in is the compost that many better worlds can spring from. Many possible worlds can spring from. And I think us trying to have a meaningful, heartfelt conversation about things that really do matter through this military technology, like that's the only remediation we've got. It's like I've even stopped looking at the conspiracy shit, and by that I mean literally just reading government documents and watching the news, and
right.
like reading official data and then comparing it to official data from a year ago. That's conspiracy theorists these days. They're just researchers who don't get to have friends anymore.
Right.
And I've stopped that stuff because I'm like, what am I accomplishing here, the only thing I need to look for is falling rocks. I don't need to know anything else except where the rocks might fall.
I like that.
And I still might get hit by a fucking rock. So I think the world that comes next after this colonial project, it's not even that, it's the colonial project, which is an evolution of empire, which probably started somewhere before Rome, but Rome's the furthest back that I can trace. That sort of, we're building roads up to your town, and that's all we have to do to own you. That kind of and you see that in America, and God bless both of them. They have the gold eagle, or the bald eagle. Like, there's this weird eagle shit with empire. The Nazis, Napoleon, eagles and Sky Daddy. Is that it? Is it a Sky Daddy thing? No.
There's something about it's predatory and it's above everything else. But like, it's that's an appropriation, right? Because the eagle's just being an eagle.
Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely appropriation. Well, it's not really appropriation. It's just black magic.
Yeah. That's a good point too.
You're riding a spirit to greatness when you don't deserve the greatness. Like, it's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just sometimes think about that Philip K. Dick thing where like there's like a whole 1,000 years like missing from history or something, 600 years or something. Like, I don't know. There's definitely something going on, but that's a good, that's another good segue from what you just said. And it's medicine for me, and it's good for me to hear that because I am very drawn to the conspiracy shit too. And like I found myself getting in this place where like I was just looking at too much of it, and then it was kind of breeding resentment in me instead of making me more free. Which, like, but then I have this kind of like my rationale is like, well, I'm hunting for the truth, but like I will never know. Like you said, I won't know it. So like, yeah, dude, I could go into it forever, but I'm trying to be free of fear, not to make myself more afraid, which is another fine line.
That's interesting. I find this this shape that takes place in the world where you can either, it goes back to King Solomon, right? All is vanity, focus on that which is eternal. And so when you get like the STEM sciences, and what you get is infinite complexity. The physical world will unfold into complexity infinitely. You can study it for infinite generations forever, and you will still not have it like figured out. It'll always just be like more categories, smaller.
Yeah, knowledge is totally fractal. You can just follow it down into the abyss.
Right. And that's the all is vanity to me.
That's cool. I like that.
So like you can hunt for the truth, which sounds like a noble pursuit, but how's it making your life better?
Right. Like, yeah, what's your life like? That's
how do you feel when you're done studying it?
Right. And are you hunting for it on a miniature surveillance device that's designed to put hooks in you? Like, you know what I mean? Like, well,
yeah. And okay, so if you're spending like 3 hours a day researching conspiracy stuff, and then 4 hours a day after that feeling like shit, the MKulture program is still stealing your life from you.
Yeah. Right. Oh man. Yeah.
It's capitalizing on your heart that wants, out of its genuine desire for truth, to find truth, and it's co-opting you and turning you into an acid.
Man, that is wonderful, and I needed to hear it because I mean it's awful and terrible, but it's great to hear. Like
Medicine
when
tastes good.
dude, yeah, right. The medicine doesn't have to taste good. When I'm living my life and like when I'm interested in my own life and I'm filling it with things, like I don't do that because I don't have time to do that shit.
Yeah.
It's really like the idle hands or the devil's playground or whatever, you know?
I think
but like even though, you know.
Yeah, even though we fuck with the devil.
Yeah, right.
Not so bad.
Right. Maybe Satan is a bit.
I think really like archons are our devils.
They are. They totally are. Right. I'm with that. Say again.
Archons and spooks.
Right. Which
there's a boogeyman for us.
Yeah, because like it's what's on the side of life, you know?
Yeah.
And an archon it's trying to make the world more fucking boring, man. Like, or to put like an interstitial layer between everything, right? Like to insinuate itself into every interaction. It's like a fucking condom. Right? Which, you know, is fucking lame.
Antiphylactic. Fuck.
And a demon is like going to help you get down. And, you know, the only time that a spirit. Okay. I'm going to try to figure out how to say this because it gets dicey, as you know. The only time that a spirit comes to me in a way that's horrifying or as like an affront is when there's something that I haven't yet integrated. Like I said, like the fear or the disgust or the initial discomfort being that, like that layer being able to be pierced. You know? And so if the archons are the interstitial layer.
Wow.
Right? That fear is piercing that. Or that disgust is piercing that.
Shit. Okay. So on our episode with Beverly, we just talked for a little while about whatever. And this came up, this idea of like the colonialist pinning down of butterflies, and you want to be a naturalist and like categorize everything. But then now what we're getting is that's inverting and we're doing it to our insides.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So it's the same process. We've just turned it to our insides, and and that's where the politicization of everything comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything has to have a title. You can express any opinion, and there's going to be one asshole on Twitter that goes, "Oh, you're part of this political group. That's right. Your agenda that's behind the thing you said." Because no one believes that anyone says anything from their heart anymore at all. But so, wait, what were we just talking about?
Man, you were talking about the colonial project.
Right.
Yeah.
So what you're talking about is archons. It's almost like a membrane.
Yeah.
That comes around and encapsulates and pillows you in. Because what happens in a healing ceremony or spear contact or an initiation is there's something, a membrane is pierced.
Yes.
In an initiation, it's something where you're coming into power you didn't know you had, or you're stepping into power that you didn't have, breaking a mainframe and acquiring a wider one. Usually that's what's going on. Whether that's, whatever. But it, and even in healing, you're getting like go back and sit with what that did to you and you sit with it until it kind of untangles and reabsorbs. That's usually the process. You don't want to be forceful, but it's like this. You have to connect and pierce that so that it can reassimilate with you. And if Archons are condoms, holy shit, I'm going raw dog.
I'm trying to raw dog the cosmos, baby. But like we talk about the theater of division, it like getting between everything. And it also goes back to, I mean, okay, not to like, this is your shit, but like when you talked about how you felt like you were a sociopath and like you were blocked off from all these emotions, like that was a response to something, right? To some kind of, to some, like, whatever you want to call it, to some kind of trauma or pain or whatever it was. And so that had to be pierced, right? For healing to occur. Like something has to get in. But like if the Archon is the thing that stands between anything getting in, and it's the dividing thing. And language does it too. When we break down things like the English language, we have that thing of we have to break down everything to its constituent parts. Basically, we're vivisecting everything.
Thank you so much for saying that. I've actually said before, like, I don't know if anyone else has ever said this before, but I'm proud of myself for being like, I've never heard it say, like, what is greater, the pen or the sword? What's the fucking difference?
Right. Oh yeah, I like it. Yeah.
Second you write down the word, you've just divided the universe. And there's this, and then there's everything else. And that's what cutting does. It's the same. Yeah.
So art does something similar, but it allows, like, you're actually like kind of, what's the word I'm trying to use? You're like repurposing that into something that creates more nuance, right? So like they're honestly like, it sometimes seems like they're like the good twin and the evil twin. That's such a bad metaphor. Say it again.
Is language the one ring?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And like, so art is, I don't know. I got to maybe sit with that some more because it does something very similar, right? Like it's also putting something down, but like good art allows for there to be nuance, for it to be interpreted multiple ways, or maybe like, I don't know. I got to sit with that some more.
Yeah. Some thoughts need to bake.
Right? Because I think that language is like the one ring, but maybe just like certain languages are the one ring, I don't know.
I think there's many one rings.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like the internet's definitely in it. I think the internet's the best example of the one ring.
Yeah. Well, I like go ahead.
Oh, just you put it on to do a good thing, but then you find yourself picking it back up and trying to put it on later for no reason.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's just kind of sort of like addiction too. But I've heard, in the circles that we run in, people talking about trying to understand what's going on as being the one ring, or like trying to understand the conspiracy can be like the one ring, right?
Yeah.
Because, and someone said it and I can't give them credit because I don't remember who it was, but it's like, I like that obsession to know like how the precious works, or just that obsession with the precious. Like I've got to know, but like, it kind of can be taking, like you said, it can be taking me down the road that I don't know.
I've never shamefully never read Faust. Have you?
No, I haven't, shamefully as well.
I was just wondering, like, does Faust try to do good things initially, because I don't know. And or is Lord of the Rings like our prime example in literature of this scenario of like the thing that is evil must be used at times to prevent the evil?
Yeah, and because I always want to say it's just power in general, but I've actually kind of come away from that as I have gotten an exposure to power that does not do that.
Right.
You
and
know?
I think like Gandalf's a great example of that, because he's never
Yeah.
really, I mean, even Galadriel, like she's such a badass and she struggles hard with that shit. So
Yeah. And like who was able to not? Who, like Sam?
yeah, the pure of heart.
Yeah, just kind of the bumbling, like the fool, right?
But like then yeah, why didn't Sam just carry it?
He did for a second.
Yeah, it didn't work out that great, did it?
Well, I think he didn't. He have it when, or am I thinking of some? It's been a long time since I've read it, but I want to say he carried it for a second while he like stormed that orc tower. And there's a second where you see Sam as like the total badass that he is. You know, kind of in the same way that when Theoden is like riding to his death, basically, and it talks about this is one of my favorite passages from Lord of the Rings. He was a vision of the kings of old in glory undimmed before the breaking of the world.
Oh,
yeah, like where you can see, like he's really Tolkien is so good at like at that, like letting that mythical break through in those moments.
The way he writes is like conjuration. Like it's beautiful in the way that like like you're standing here and you know exactly where you're standing, and then within like 2 sentences he's pulled in things from the furthest reaches of everything you know and further, and like you are in relation to these things, like the way that you call in the quarters before a ceremony or whatever. It's unbelievable. Like some passages in Tolkien, I swear, when you read them, you are invoking Middle Earth, and that makes it like easier to imagine. And I've only read like 3 Tolkien books, 2.5. I'm still reading the same one I started over the winter because I read like 5 books at a time in ADHD.
Man, I do the same thing. I read 5 at a time, and just but I'm just kind of come to accept it. It's cool.
Yeah. They're like, when I have a full bookshelf of shit that I haven't read, I'm doing well because that means I have options.
Yes, exactly. What is it the Silmarillion that you're reading?
No, I'm reading Children of Hurin.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I haven't read that one, but I love that story because it's in the Silmarillion. It's a shorter treatment, but it's a man. I don't really, so there's Silmarillion is the one I've read the most. I used to read it every year.
That's amazing to me. I thought I was a badass because I read it once when I was like, and I was like that shit's thick as the Bible in the way that it reads. I mean, it's poetic. It doesn't have shitty chapters with just lineages for 50 pages, but
it's like close though.
Huh?
It's close. Some of it is.
I don't remember much of it. I know that
there are parts where it's just like talking about like, but it's like the lineages of elves and where they ended up settling. So I'm always like super fascinated in that world building stuff, man. And that's maybe another ADHD thing where like I could just get hyper focused into that and just like trance myself out into that world because it's laid out for me there. Like, and there's something in me that's like, the more you know about it, the more, I don't know, the more real it is. I don't know if that's true, but that's my instinct.
The thing about Tolkien's books, the thing about Middle Earth is it is real.
It's 100% real. It's the truest thing I've ever read.
It's some kind of real. Like,
it's more real than real.
Okay. Here's my weird ass Tolkien story.
Let's get it.
And it's like partly why I put down Children of Hurin and haven't picked it back up, because it affected me so much. Because a few years ago I was doing a lot of microdosing mushrooms at the time and having amazing dreams. Like like most of the time I wasn't even a body, and I'm just zipping around and like watching civilizations occur as I'm staring down at a planet. Like things like just unfathomably cool stuff was happening. Highly recommend a microdose of psilocybin right before bed so it hits you while you're in your dream. Um, highly recommend that. And ask your ancestors to come and lead you and heal you before you do it. And I had this dream that I was standing on a mountain, in a bunch of mountains, with this man who was wearing my dad's form, but he wasn't my dad. And he definitely felt like family. Like he might have actually been my dad, but not my human dad.
Yeah.
Like some kind of weird father figure. And we were standing on this mountain and looking out, and we were doing some sort of vibratory dance singing thing. But first we were discussing plans and looking at it like engineers. And then we would sing holes through the mountain.
Oh, cool.
And it became a passageway for our people, like a giant mass of people to walk through. And it eventually kind of became like a city. And then I'm reading Children of Hurin, and it talks about in the old days and the elves, and there were 2 cities of caves. One of them was already there, and the elves found it. And then a later swarm of elves came back. I think they were the ones that left and could never return from the place beyond or whatever, from the east. And one of them,
they didn't choose to come back, I think. Yeah, but go ahead.
some of them didn't choose to, and then some of them chose to come back after.
Yeah, because Fëanor led a bunch of them back chasing after Morgoth because he took the jewels.
Right.
Yeah, so like the dark elves are the ones that never went over.
Right.
They're called dark elves, and they're not like dark elves like D&D dark elves. I mean, maybe they are, I don't know, but they just didn't see the light of Valinor. And then there are like high elves that did, but even the high, so this is an interesting thing, and I'm not meaning to interrupt you, but one of the cool things about it is that even the high elves in Middle Earth are like transgressors against the light. But anyway, continue.
Right. And that's where you get that whole, like, clearly Tolkien had a Christian sky daddy in his cosmology, where there's this, like, you're shamed if you come back even to help because you left me and I'm jealous. I'm a jealous guy.
It was kind of the original sin because they came back for revenge.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because Morgoth committed the first murder and slayed Fëanor's father and took the Silmarils, which had the light of the trees in them, and then fled across the ocean back to Middle Earth. And then they were like, yeah, we're going to get those and kill your ass. So now, Fëanor swore revenge in the name of the one in heaven, and was like, fuck y'all, I'm going to get my shit and avenge my dad. And he's like a very tragic fallen character, but just like a really good one. But sorry, I keep interrupting because it's like I have to.
That was him going like, fuck God, fuck Jesus.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But one of them was.
And I think you're talking about Menegroth and Nargothrond.
Yes, and he was so obsessed with the old city of caves that he built a fucking new one in that one little place that's in the middle of the desert, but it's just this mountain range.
Yeah.
So when I had this dream, this was a few years ago, when I'm reading the book, I read that part, and suddenly I'm like, and when I say this, I mean in that ritual sense where it's like, it's in your mind, but it's like, you're there. I was back in the dream, and I was like, there was this knowing that they were the same fucking place.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know that they are, but it's like, I know that.
But you went there.
That world was, I mean, the work of Becca Tarnas comparing Tolkien's diaries to the Red Book by Jung, like it's undeniable that this like Tolkien wouldn't just make up words in Elvish. He would be like, I have to go find out and go into active imagination and fucking find it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that place exists. And so it also reminds me of, and I talked about this a little bit with Kurt, but H.P. Lovecraft's Dream World, and it's like not. I feel like these stories don't get as like any coverage hardly at all, but they are connected to the rest of the mythos. But he has a very robust like dream world cycle in his stories, and I used to go there in my dreams.
oh wow.
Yeah, and I mean, some of the cities like were different cities, but like I knew it was that dream world, if that makes any sense. Like, and they had names. I could remember the names of some of them.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I have a pretty consistent. Well, I don't anymore. It's weird. It's like in Dune where he gets to a certain point and he doesn't know the future anymore.
Oh yeah.
That happened in my life. There were years where shit would happen and I'd be like, oh, okay, things go this way because I had a dream it's the same feel as this moment. And I kind of just know things land this way or whatever.
Yeah.
But I also would have this dream city. And then beyond the city where there were other things that happened in all these other places. And I dreamed them throughout years and all in different order.
Cool.
And when I was in California trimming weed in like 2013 or 14, it was like more weed than I'd ever consumed in my life. And it was just constant. And some kind of, again, membrane broke. And suddenly, like for the few months I was there, throughout the day, I would just get flashes of dreams. And it would be like, okay, I remember this entire dream. And I know I had it 5 years ago when I was living at this apartment with these people. And then later, this one was 2 months ago. I was back home. This one was when I was 5 years old. And what happened was in those few months where I started recalling having this like huge dream recollection surge, I was realizing they were all in relation to one another in the dream world and that they all actually formed a map. And then later, I put the pieces together. They were all events from my life. They were just the weird dream versions of them.
Oh man, that's really cool.
And so at this point, I'm at a point in the timeline where there's no future hints anymore. It's really fucking weird.
Man, that really makes me think of, and dude, I don't even know like how, like this is probably like not legit, but there's even me trying to describe it is gonna be like, yeah, whatever. There's like a YouTube video where this guy who was like apparently involved in some like black project that was like Operation Looking Glass or something, where they were looking at the future, and he's describing that they were able to see up to a certain point, but after that, like they couldn't see anything. There was like some event where after that, all bets were off.
Fuck.
Yeah, and he was like, "We're almost there," or something. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's crazy.
Okay, so this is the kind of information that it is actually worth looking into conspiracy stuff for.
Yes.
When you find results, when you find like things that inform you about how the world and consciousness actually work, because you can intuit like or infer the way that they dealt with the results, or that there is value there. It's hard to not get caught up in the emotional justice. That's what it is. The justice aspect. It gets you fired up. It gets you emotional. And that's fucking crazy if you think about social justice movement.
Oh yeah. Because
everyone's fired up to do good. And that means their amygdala is fucking huge.
Right. Well, and you know, if my desire to do good is fueled by resentment and fear, then I'm holding the One Ring.
Yeah. Yeah. And resentment and fear, that's, well, according to Master Yoda, that's one step from hate.
Dude, I mean, I think that's death. And not even like the cool kind. like living death, walking death, you know?
Yeah.
So in this
zombie.
Right. In this video where this guy's talking about that, he actually gives that as the reason why like the the plan of the elites has been fast forwarded. Why they seem so desperate to do these things that they're doing is because they know that, like, well, it's either they do, like, they know that it's either just try it and fail, but they just know that I want to play it now. I'm not describing it great. Like they know their days are numbered and that soon they won't be able to control anything. So they're trying to jam all the shit through as fast as they can because why not? But that's like rings true to me.
Yeah.
I don't know, but we know.
Yeah, I definitely, everything that's happened in the past 2.5 years feels very rushed.
Right.
What's weird about it is it's rushed and it's sloppy, but it's working as well as it is.
Yeah, no doubt. There was something else I wanted that you mentioned that made me think of. I lost it.
I like leaving a moment of silence like that. Like when a natural one happens, that's us combating the, like, let it happen.
Yeah, and not forcing it.
Let the people see the silence.
I like it, and it's definitely been the journey of doing this for me. Especially when I do this thing where I like can't finish a sentence. But really, it's like when you're fishing for the right word, you know?
Well, I find that anytime I have a 2-second delay between when I want to speak and when I actually do, I descend into a pit of terror where, yeah, there's just like this swirling, like if the silence could speak, it would say, like, why haven't you said it yet? Why aren't you saying anything?
Right. What if the words don't come?
And then it just gets angrier and louder. And it's like, that voice, like if you even like give it any attention, it becomes everything and it becomes hypnotizing. It's fascinating because even when I'm comfortable, it's still there. It's just really quiet.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing as the voice that, like the voice of the intuition, or like it's probably the voice of the ancestors too. Like those are probably, I think, really closely connected.
Yes.
And the voice of my body. And then there's like this shadow voice. And right, like if I'm in fear and I'm like letting that kind of wash over me, it can get louder, but like how do you be in relation to that, you know?
That's really been on my mind constantly lately. Like since I started the podcast, it's been like, how do I live with this?
Yeah.
And I don't think that I should have to. I actually think if I could afford it, I would just hire a shamanic healer, because I'm almost positive that there's just something stuck like a knot.
Yeah.
Is causing the performance anxiety that makes you self-reflect urgently when it comes time to be on display.
Yeah.
And that almost definitely comes from some trauma.
Yeah.
Because some people don't have it. Some people are just fine.
Yeah, some people are naturals. And I feel like I used to, like we were talking about before we started recording, I used to be better at it when I was like all fucked up.
I mean, like, and it wasn't just like I was fucked up so I thought I was cool. It was like the whole town liked me.
Yeah.
You know? Like,
no, right.
Well, at least all the people I cared about liking me did.
Well,
and
go ahead.
No, it was, and like being able to like play a show and look out and be like, who do I want to sleep with tonight?
Yeah.
Like that was live from my 20s and for a while. And it just, not that that was a healthy thing, but like the confidence level was so high.
Right.
And it wasn't like necessarily all earned. And I think that's part of it. I think learning that I could be so sure of myself and still be a fucking mess in the end and not actually know what I was doing or talking about most of the time. Now it echoes in my head, and it makes me feel like what gives me the right to give anyone advice? What gives me the right to who the fuck am I to think anyone wants to hear about my life or my experiences? Because like I've read books that are smarter than anything I can say, and they're there for anyone to buy. So like all this is packed into that moment of terror.
Yeah, that's getting in my own way too. Like I do the same exact thing. Like, how am I going to help anybody? But that's in my experience is like a form of selfishness, because the grace that I've been given and the absolute just like wonderful things that I've been able to experience through like a reconnection with spirit and a reconnection with like really my true self, or like who I am and what I came here to do. When I am in that moment, I'm not always there, right? But that is a grace that I know that there are people out there that just would fucking die for. And so me thinking like, oh, like what can I do for someone? It's wrong. It's, you know.
Now, when you can't reach your own state of grace that you know you're capable of, you know damn well you can do it, but you can't access it at that time for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And then you think about that, like what other people would give for blah, blah, blah. Like, what does that make you feel when that happens? Does it make you feel better, or does it make you feel more not anxious about trying, like guilted in like you have to do it because other people?
Probably a mixed bag. I don't think it's it's not really a guilt thing.
Yeah.
When I'm not able to reach that state of grace, I'm not able to access, like I'm not in a place of gratitude. But if I, like, you know what I mean? But if I this is going to be so like whatever, dude, but like it's an absence of gratitude. And so when I can get back in the gratitude, then I'm back in it. But I can't see it. It's more of a not being able to see, you know?
Yeah.
But,
yeah, and then it's a leap if you can't see.
Yeah. But the thing is, to me, is just to keep walking.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something. It's amazing how long it's taken me to learn to like that. My body just learns now that if I feel really bad, all I have to do is go like say some prayers and cleanse.
Yeah. And like just sometimes, dude, right. Or like do something you enjoy doing, or like saying prayers and cleansing is great because it's intentional. And really for me, it's sometimes it's just, and like I said, this is not always available to me. And when I'm really deep in that, then maybe like, I don't know, but sometimes it's just enough to like not do anything. Like don't do anything right now. You know?
I'm a firm believer in not doing things.
Me too. And I think that I have guilt for not doing things really is where most of my guilt comes. But that's like that Protestant bullshit, you know?
I programmed myself with a lot of guilt, oddly enough, from reading Castaneda books when I was like late teen. Because this whole concept of like, you're going to die and your time is running out and there's an urgency to everything.
Yeah.
And I'm militarily programmed, like I MKultured myself into that. I psyoped myself into being guilty when I don't accomplish. And like, you're wasting your life. Like these minutes never, but, I'm coming out of it now, but it is, holy shit, it's been years. And I'm just now, like 20 years fucking later. Well, not 20, but yeah, close.
Long enough, right?
Yeah, close.
Dude, and the funny thing about it is that I wasn't actually getting anything done when I had that going on.
Right. Nothing of value, yeah. Nothing you look back on now and be like, man, that was good shit.
Right.
That's a good point.
I had another. Oh yeah, the herbals.
Yeah, it's like the only thing that doesn't bother my tummy.
It's a digestif, right?
Yeah, it's actually pretty good. I mean, once you get like half a bottle down, it's not so good for your digestion anymore.
I've been there.
But I think a really wonderful, like, I love the taste of it. And let me just say, if you're a witch or a wizard, don't sleep on the only booze with 56 herbs in it that I know of.
Yeah, and that deer is a Saint Hubert thing, right?
Is it?
Yeah, he's the patron saint of hunters. And he saw, like, he was a hunter, and he was out hunting, and he saw a vision of a deer with a shining cross between its antlers, and he went into the priesthood.
And then he shot at it, and it ended up being Saint Sebastian.
And he shot at it, and then like dragged it on the back of his truck, and went through town with his truck nuts hanging down,
just to let everybody else know the score. I don't take kindly.
That's funny that even comes up, because I actually had an encounter with a deer last night. I'm kind of in the suburbs, but it's like a stone's throw from just like the country and like horse farms. And I think it's like old Cherokee Nation. I need to look into that, because I was reading some about it, and I'm like, oh shit, that's a big deal if so. But so there was a deer on the front lawn here, and it was like maybe 10, 15 feet away from me last night. And there was like a lightning storm, like a silent lightning storm going on overhead. And I just went outside and was just like staring into this deer's eyes, and it was like staring back at me. And I just like sat down, and we just stared at each other for like, it's weird, because I got closer to it to find a good spot to sit, and it didn't run away. And we just like looked at each other for a while.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I had that happen with a rabbit once.
Oh yeah, dude, that's
it was like
rabbit's eyes are full of something.
Yeah. Well, it was at my grandparents' house, and I'd had dreams about rabbits a few times, and we had some in the yard. I had a dream that I was like, there were like a bunch of rabbits down on the ground, and somehow I was just like smushing my face down into them and like rubbing it in their fur and cuddling with them, and they loved it.
Yeah.
And then it was within the next week. I like walked down to my little spot in the woods, and on the trail, a rabbit popped out and just turned and looked at me, and like I just froze, and it was that feeling like hold on, like all your internal monologue stops, and it's almost like all the inside stuff told me to pay attention. Yeah. And I just stopped. Like, we just stared at each other for a solid 5-6 minutes, motionless, and then hopped away. And like, they're normally very, very scared of me, but it was like such a special, strange moment where we just stood there and absorbed the impression of one another.
Yeah.
And there was no thought or logic. Like, the rabbit knew that I wasn't prey, and I knew the rabbit wasn't prey. So we were just two people being in the woods together for a minute. And I think that there was no more point to it than that for me.
I like
that. But that's special. That's something we completely overlook so often, is that those little impressions you get from animals, like, oh, it's like they're making this. That's usually your actual intuition picking up on what the animal is feeling. And you just assume you're ascribing it these human tendencies or whatever. But I think in a lot of cases, we're really just like picking up on what the animal means.
Oh, that's an interesting take on anthropomorphism, and I like it. It's like, well, that makes me think of, for some reason, images of half human, half animal. Like the that cave painting. I think it's the name they call it is like the magician, even. And it's like a person with like a deer's head or something, or with antlers. It looks like Cernunnos or something, right?
Huh.
But it's like an ancient cave painting.
I don't know it.
Yeah, you should check it out. It's cool. Yeah, I don't know. It just made me think of that. Like that liminal space. It's like you're experiencing it and it's experiencing you. There's a connection, right? Like, because it wasn't like I've had animal encounters where I did hear things that I was being told through that animal, but this was just one where it was just like total silence with lightning overhead, just staring, like us staring at each other, like you said, two beings in the wilderness. And like I almost had that thing where, you ever have it where when you're focusing on something and everything around starts to get almost fuzzy?
Yeah.
It was like that.
That's really. That's actually been like the beginning of some really weird meditations for me.
Yeah, I know something's going on when that happens.
That was one of the things I got from the Castaneda books when I was younger that was useful, that never left me, was he had this thing where he would put two rocks of the same size next to each other and then cross your eyes so they become the same rock.
Oh, that's cool.
And then you stare at it until the side blurs and everything else disappears. And then you kind of zoom in on the thing and it becomes more texture and it becomes another world.
Man, that's almost... Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. It just becomes like a gateway.
That's almost like I've activated sigils like that. And I can't remember if I learned it somewhere or if it was just a natural thing, So if I'm not giving credit, whoops. But where you kind of do the magic eye thing. Like you're staring at the sigil so long that it starts, this might be Gordon White, I think, where it starts to dance a little bit and parts of it like disappear.
Yeah.
It's really, that reminds me of that.
I think that was Gordon's instruction. But now I'm thinking like I really want to draw the same sigil twice and set them side by side.
Yeah. Even on rocks would be cool.
Yeah. That'd be fun.
And then when I've got certain, like, I had a Cyprian altar, and this was like kind of accidental, but like accidental, right? Like, yeah, sure. But where the colors were perfect, so that like the fabric that was on the cloth, and then the gold of like like parts of the statue and certain like the cross and things, so that if I stared at it long enough, it would almost become like, this is a really weird way to describe it, but almost like staccato, where like, or like, I almost wanted to call it Kentucky Fried, but where like, you know what I'm talking about? Where it's not blurry, but everything is like popping in a way, like the interplay of the colors. Like, I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm not going to be able to describe it.
Like, kind of like when you get certain shades of red and blue next to each other.
Yes. Yeah.
You're like, what's going on here?
Right. So like this, it was like kind of a faux velvet. So it had that kind of like shimmeriness to it. Anyway.
Well, I definitely have that thing sometimes where if you get your altar set up right and you sit really still as you say your prayers or you meditate, it's almost like the suggestive shimmering of things and the light that you are receiving from the candlelight unfolds into a bigger scene.
Yeah, like go ahead. Yeah, so it's like that.
Yeah. So it's like you still have the real things that are actually tangibly, physically in the room, but around them, almost like they are the seed that grows this other scene.
Yeah.
And with Cyprian, that's often become a weird, like, church, like it's like the same shape as a traditional European old ass church, but there's like really weird things about it, like coloring or mosaics or something like that.
And then sometimes also with his stuff too, it becomes like sort of gothic too, like, and I mean gothic in the terms of like, not like a gothic cathedral, but like goth. For
really?
me personally, yeah. Like it'll kind of have like, it'll have that, but then it'll have that sort of flavor to it.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah, everybody's Saint Cyprian is a little different. Everybody's spirits are different, but it's like, yeah, my experience of Cyprian was it was actually pretty confused for a long time.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to think of him, and it was once I stopped trying that he really started coming through. And it's like once I stopped putting that yang active effort into connection, and I started just kind of relaxing more, than getting out of my own way, essentially.
Yeah.
He kind of appears, definitely a little bit darker than he did before. And not dark like bad or mischievous even. It's dark like I understand the darkness. And
yeah, right.
And I'm not afraid of anything in that kind of way. Like I am part darkness, so I can help you navigate it.
Right. Well, and that's cool. Like, so there is going to be an inherent, almost like intimidation factor to someone that the darkness holds no fear to them, right? Like they're going to have like a kind of edge because
oh yeah,
they've integrated that, right? Like another good example of that is Odin. When he comes across, it's very much like, okay, this dude's walked there. And it's kind of like on him a little bit. But then there's like he comes through in different ways. I think that's probably why he has like 1,000 names, right? Like there's like Wanderer Odin, and then there's like King Odin, and then there's like Warrior Odin,
I think it's a worthwhile question to ask if there's just one shape-shifting male spirit for the whole damn world. Like
that is a worthwhile question.
I don't think it is, but I think it's
a worthwhile question.
At least there's some really fascinating stuff that happens. I mean, you can't deny that like Odin walked around a lot in this part of Europe. But it's interesting when you get into like the more Gaulish stuff, because you get Dispater, which is probably not Odin, but you get and Kernunos I don't believe is as either, but one of the according to Caesar, one of the most venerated gods in all throughout the tribes of Gaul that he experienced was what's his name? The one with three faces.
I don't know.
Oh, it sucks. I can't think of his name. And he's supposed to be like their version of Mercury. Like the Greeks just called him Mercury. Oh, that's funny. I feel like me not being able to remember his name right now is him being a trickster.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing.
Because I know it like very well, and it's just not.
It's just escaping.
Yeah.
Well, then there's also like the Aiden Wachter thing, which is like there's many Odins, which is also a worthwhile question. And I think any question is worthwhile as long as I'm not preloading it with the answer that I want.
Yeah, and then being upset if someone else.
And then being upset when someone else disagrees, right? Or when I find something that's different,
Oh, you believe something different than me? Well, I think that you should be destroyed because you are violence.
Right. And dude, that's just what's happening again in our society. And it really bums me out sometimes that it's not as apparent as it is, but I guess that's the nefariousness of it. But like, when did it become not okay to question things?
Well, because everything's already been decided.
Yeah. because that Archon has charted out every piece of the butterfly. And so this is a thorax, and this is an antennae, and this does that, and the thorax does this, but the antennae doesn't do that, and the wing is this, and it doesn't do that.
A resting belief is like having 1,000 like auto replies set up in your email.
Yeah, 100%.
And you're never actually typing anything to anyone at all.
And I'm free from having to do that. I'm free from that ickiness.
Yes.
But I think,
that's it.
right?
There's some kind of people getting off and shirking the responsibility of having to deal with each individual fucking instance in context. Like, if somebody says a word they don't like, it's usually pretty fucking obvious if that's actually hate speech or if that's just part of their culture, that word means something different to them.
Right. Or if it's just, if it's an intentional trespass, that's part of things like comedy and a lot of art, like sometimes even to get across to someone, I have to you have to shake them, so to speak, right?
Yeah, I was going to say even intentional transgression should be permitted in art because art is the safe space for that.
Yeah, that's what it does.
I think the problem is we've slowly allowed the definition of art to change into this, into purely self-expression.
Or even man, it's almost like art is just become fan service.
Yeah, that too.
And the self-expression one definitely. And I think that because there's some expressions that I have that I know are not worth expressing. It's not all good, man.
Well, and that's okay.
I can only say that for me, right? I can't say that for you.
But I don't think that's the problem necessarily. I think the problem with art becoming self-expression rather than exploration or just this wide-eyed wonder is that, so if art is purely self-expression, then if you write something, you're exploring in that. Let's say that I'm exploring my relationship with violence and how I feel about violence, and I want to write something to really understand it, and I don't even know what I'm writing until I'm done with it. And then I put that out there. People go read that and they go, this is his self-expression. This is telling us what his politics and his moral character truly are.
Right.
And that assumption is the devil.
Yeah, right. I see what you're saying. It's always conflated. I see what you're saying with self-expression now. I get it now that you gave that example. It's always an ad hominem. It's always that we learned it I learned it in school, at least. I don't know what they're teaching nowadays, and I don't mean to say that like an old man. I just don't. But the idea that, the artist is not the art, that was something that we learned, that you don't do those ad hominem critiques. Right. If but it also got me thinking too, if art is only self-expression, then, what we're talking about with Tolkien, where he was actually going there, that gets cut off because that's just Tolkien's self-expression. He wasn't going to a real place.
It's just another archonic prophylactic over the imagination.
Prophylaxis, man. Yes. And over the whole imaginal. And that's really okay, who's doing it? I don't know. Who's at the top echelon of that op? I don't know. But what I can say is that there is something going on with disconnecting us from the imaginal.
Another thing I can say is that I think you and I are two people that are both completely and fully committed to doing the exact opposite of what that fucking thing, whatever it is, wants of us.
Right.
Like in that that's the key is if you're studying the conspiracy stuff, do it so that you can know your enemy.
Yeah.
But only in a way that you can seesaw that so that you can, like, if you think that separation is good, then I'm going to be connected. Fuck you.
Yeah.
So there's this sense of like counterintelligence, but only if you can put that into action, only if it's actionable.
Beautiful. Yeah. Don't become Gollum. Like if I sit in a cave and stare at the One Ring, I become Gollum.
Oh my God, that's perfect. Yes. Because, oh my God, hunched over staring at your phone, people look like fucking Golem at the coffee shop.
Yeah. And at restaurants, when you see a family all staring at their phones and not talking.
Yep. Which, by the way, you don't see that in Denmark. Not ever.
Wonderful.
It's like a social taboo to pull your phone out if you are spending time with other people.
Beautiful. That sounds like the kind of place, like, because I practice that, and it's like, so yeah, there would be a difference between me practicing that and then being self-righteous about it, as opposed to me just practicing like attraction, like practicing it for the sake of attraction. Like I'm going to be what I am. And because I think that, like you're talking about, like doing the opposite of what that Archon wants is being who you are. It's being your true self. It's doing what you came here to do. But I can't, like, the moment I'm doing that for someone else, I've lost.
Right.
The moment I'm doing that to elicit a response in you, I've lost. I can only do it with myself as the origin point and just dancing my dance and enjoying that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that really is it. It's like those moments when you've been on like tripping or at a festival or with a group of people and you've lost all of that sense of like, how am I looking from the corner of the room?
Yeah.
It's dead in those moments. Those are the best moments of our lives. Those are the moments we remember.
Yeah, that's where life is. That's life. That's being human.
Yeah.
This has been great, man.
Yeah, really. I just got to notice that my phone is low on battery, but I can go plug it in.
Well, I was going to say that's like, we can do either. That's a really good stopping point.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why force it?
Dude, well, we're going to do this some more, so I'm not worried about it,
Yeah. I'll come back on anytime you ask, and
awesome.
I'm so excited to have you on our show.
Dude, I'm excited too, man. It's been great talking to you.
It's been so good. Thanks for having me on, Tim.
Hey, thanks for coming on. We'll see you next time. I'll be honest. I was having sort of a bummer of a day before we had this conversation, and it really lifted my spirits. Talking with people who are able to be open and honest, not only about their dreams, struggles, and fears, but also throwing caution to the wind and letting that freak flag fly, is a breath of fresh air in a superficial age. Not only that, but it's left me with some things to jaw on. A good conversation has a way of unfolding as the ideas sort of take root, and eventually they bear fruit. For more from the Reverend, follow him on Twitter at Rev Janglebones. Visit his website at www.reverendjanglebones.com. And also remember to listen and subscribe to his and Kurt's podcast at rss.com/podcasts/The Soapbox. Again, that's rss.com/podcasts/The Soapbox. I'll see y'all next week. Until then, I gotta fly.